morning, everybody, and welcome back to the show. Hey, Karen, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome.
Okay, folks, we hope that this one is going to be an interesting one for you. It is what we're calling authenticity when we don't agree. But what we wanted to narrow down on today was the more challenging times when we want to be authentic, but it's a difficult situation. It might be a situation at work. It may be a situation in your relationship where you're not agreeing with something that's being asked of you or something that you have to do. Now what? What do I do when there's this dissonance or this disagreement? And it's more complicated than just straight boundaries where we say no. So we're going to be going through framing this partly in a work environment because this is where this happens quite a bit. And then I'll share a little bit about how this might show up if it is something that can also occur in a family situation, a relationship situation. So I'm going to let Karen just start us off.
I think it's very interesting because in this world right now, where there is a lot of chaos outside, and you can start to feel it inside in the work environment as well. And there's so many decisions that are occurring. And I felt that when we disagree, it's really, really hard because your values, we talked about the values before. And so values could go against something. We talked about it's important to know your values, right? And
Mm,
know where you stand to make a decision. And so, you're going towards your values or against. Now,
right.
sometimes a decision is such that you don't own the power of the decision. Now, when it's all about you and you own the power of decision, it's a lot easier. And you could hold up that boundaries and that defense. But at work, especially as leaders or as a whether you're in a leadership position like a manager, people leader, or you're a project leader and they make a decision that is just too crazy, you just don't get, right? Or just as an individual in just environment, right? I just think that this becomes more and more important. We wanted to talk about this because this is the challenge. This is what we mean by sometimes there's absurdities of being human. It's not joyful. It's not a challenge. And you're like, I can't even believe they're thinking like this, right? It's like that type. That's the absurdity of being a human where you have to still as a leader or you have to follow through.
So I'm a sole proprietor now, so I work for myself. But there was a time when I worked in corporate environment where I was a team member. I was not in a position of leadership and more someone who was required to carry out instructions. And my boss used to tell me I had authority issues because I would
We
feel
challenge them.
yeah, if I would feel that distance. And back then, I didn't have a lot of the skills that I have now.
Mhm.
And so this was something that Karen and I were talking about how at this point in our lives and our careers, we have a lot more insight, wisdom, understanding that we thought would be helpful for people, that we could share what we've acquired along our way. And knowing how to handle that kind of a situation where you're preserving relationships takes a lot of tact, some political savvy and patience, and some of the things we've been talking about. And we want to show you how you start pulling together the different skills we've been starting to introduce to you and how you start understanding, oh, wow, these are foundational and it applies in all of these different types of situations. Karen is going to share with us one of the important key themes running through today and a wisdom that comes through is how to not get emotionally hooked in.
It's really important for us to realize anything can happen. It's like what's happening this moment. So even like what we were talking about, there may be a decision that you don't like and you have to share this decision. So it'll be hard in the moment, but the decision could actually reverse itself within a shorter period of time, sooner, later, who knows? But that's the whole point. We don't want you to be attached to what happens because of the fact that things could change at any time. What I learned is that when I get so angry like I used to do about a decision the corporation met and it just made no sense to me. Can't believe they're doing that. But I realized that the person who made the decision made the best decision they could make based on all the information that they were told. And they made that decision at that point. And I felt like I was holding on that resentment So I'm just doing the work that I enjoy. Because that sadness in the company about what it didn't do, that one decision, and then maybe there's another decision a year later, who knows? There's all of these I'm like taking a little bit here, and then all of a sudden my whole jar is filled with things of why I don't like the company. When in actuality, there's a lot of other things I love about the company, but I held on to that resentment. So hopefully that makes sense to you. But that was one thing that I really think is critical about authenticity and to realize as kind of a backbone to understand, especially about when there's a disagreement, when you don't really agree with the decision that was made, and how do you keep your authenticity.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I want to speak to. It's interesting what you just described about how when you get attached to the idea of whatever you were upset with, when you get emotionally hooked, and then it's over time, it's like a jar gets filled with these resentments, and then you're really unhappy. That actually parallels research done by John and Julie Gottman. These are famous therapists who have done the most comprehensive research on what makes successful marriages. And one of the things that came out of their research was when couples were unhappy or where something was causing unhappiness, their perception was that there was a lot more of these difficult things that were going into the jar. But objectively, it actually wasn't any more than when things were going well. There was
Oh,
just as much,
interesting.
yeah, there was just as much good stuff going on,
Yeah,
just as
exactly.
many connections being met, just as all these things are good. But when the strife starts to arise, the threat assessing brain focuses in on what's negative and then perceives that all that is in the jar is negative. So this propensity of the brain, it's going to show up whether it's at work or whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your partner. It's just, again, part of being human. But the more that we know that our brain has that propensity, we can bring that awareness and bring it into the practice of non attachment and not getting hooked, so we can have a pause to reflect and just, take a breath and see what's really going on. What are our big picture priorities and reorient? So that was one thing. And then the other thing that I heard you mention was this awareness that in the moment, we maybe don't have all the information.
That's
And
critical. That was
yeah,
critical for me to like exactly.
yeah. And you mentioned about how this links to authenticity. When we get hooked and we're emotional, we want to be authentic. And if we don't agree, especially this is if you're in a leadership position, there may be, well, if I'm authentic and I'm saying what's really true to me, then don't I walk around and wear that on my sleeve that I don't agree? But that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate in the work environment, because then you're throwing your boss under the bus, you're throwing, the company under the bus, and that creates a lot of strife. But then we don't want to swing to the other extreme of masking and, pretending and acting as if and faking till
It's
you
a
make
great
it.
decision. Yahoo! Because people are going to go right through it. They're going to
Right.
see it. Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
really believe that because they know your values, right? It goes against all those other decisions that you are.
Or
Yeah.
even if you didn't do it with that kind of enthusiasm,
Yeah.
even if you just did the minimal pretending to be in agreement, like, well, this is what they said it was. And, yep, I
And
have to
that's
agree
it.
with it. Even if it's minimal like that, the thing is, you're still not feeling in your integrity. So, what is this nuance that we are talking about, which we see as a combination of political savvy, wisdom, and your authenticity? That you have to bring these things all together to navigate these challenging moments.
And on a non attachment before.
Right.
So political savvy, wisdom, authenticity, and non attachment.
So we're going to go over and break this down into two different situations. So the first situation we want to focus on is when you are part of the conversation, meaning you may be an executive, you may be on that leadership team, and this is a population that Karen primarily works with.
Mhm.
Okay, so the first thing we want to do when we talk about what's a process that you could use to show up authentically in these difficult situations is we're going to break it down to components. So the first component is some wisdom that I got from one of our directors that we've mentioned in a previous episode, Harry, the wise Harry. When I was younger, I was one of these people, if I didn't like a decision, I wore it on my sleeve. And Harry pulled me aside one day and he said, Christina, you have a lot of insight that is valuable, but you're completely ineffective because I was not very politically savvy. I would just get hooked in emotionally and I would get mad. And then I'd be a bit of a bull in a china shop. And what Harry advised me to do is, first of all, he's like, you have to build a relationship. So that's number one. When you're in a role in a leadership team or you're a supervisor, even if this is about a relationship in a blended family, it's really first focus on relationships. That's something over time that you're investing with, because in that relationship, it's when the people you're working with discover that you are someone who could be a trusted confidant, you're someone who has thoughtful opinions, you've earned that relationship that allows you to have more effectiveness when you're sharing your perspective or your insights. So that was first and foremost. The second thing he talked about was timing. I had a tendency to just blurt, and it wasn't appropriate to just blurt something in a meeting. And when I was working with a new boss, he made a comment to the team, and I knew that it wasn't something that he truly believed. And right there and then, in front of the team, I said, "You don't believe in that."
Oh my.
Yes. And he got really upset, looked at me, and I think he was trying to give me a cue. We didn't get the cue, but he looked at me and said, "Christina, yes, I do. This is my boss, and I believe what he says." And I didn't get the cue. And I went, "Nope, nope, you don't believe." I know that you don't believe. Completely inappropriate. And what Harry had taught, he's like, "Christina, yeah, no. There's a time and a place to give your input. And sometimes you have to pause and hold on to that for a moment, because maybe that's something you need to do in private. Maybe this is something you need to wait and see what are the political influences in the room that that person is dealing with. It's not necessarily the right thing in the moment to blurt that out." So building the relationship, picking the time. When is the right time to have that conversation? What else is going on? So one of the things that Harry said was, "Christina, why do you think these executives are making these decisions?" And I'm thinking, because they're terrible human beings. And he looked at me and he's like, "I can guarantee you that our VP doesn't wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and say, 'How can I screw over my employees today?'"
Exactly.
It's like, "Are you sure?" So he said,
And Christina, it's learning that when you show up, the world does not revolve around you. It revolves around everybody, and being respectful is really important, of honoring everybody and everybody's input and everyone's perspectives and where everybody's coming from. And that's something that we need to still do. Correct.
Yeah, I think I had a mental model, or I had a preconceived notion that people in authority didn't care. So then I looked at all decisions through that lens that biased how I interpreted everything.
I get it.
And
Yep.
this is where Harry gave very similar advice that my dad had given me, which was that this vice president had a lot of different demands on him. There are shareholder demands. He has higher ups. There's the corporate direction. There's the customer demands. There are many different things that he's trying to balance. This was a huge division. And he
Mhm.
said he's making the best decision that he can with the information he has. And
Yep.
this is where you spend the time to build the relationship, and you realize the timing, and you go have a private meeting. You might be bringing information he hasn't yet thought about. But my jumping to conclusion and having no wisdom, no political savvy, being authentic, but being a jerk, I wasn't being effective.
Yeah, and I also think it's not when you bring it in, it's when you started always say you're wrong.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and by saying you're wrong, it's already taking a position that
Yes.
you don't know what the heck you're talking about. Instead of it being more like, let me offer another perspective or whatever. And I think part of the problem that we also have is We tend to problem solve, so we're not really present. We can't listen about everything that's going on. And if we bring up the situation, we're trying to decide on what we're going to say, then it eliminates us to be fully present to hear some other key things that is playing into the room, like you're saying, like watching the room and listening, being
Mm.
curious. I think that's one of the things we talk about with imposter syndrome. Just always go in with curiosity to understand other people's perspective and what's going in the room. It's just a different perspective, right? Different opinion that people have. The sum is greater than the parts. That's the whole point of this as well. Okay.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about what else is going on, there's what's going on in the room, where what Karen is talking about is presence, not just being physically present in the room, but bringing presence where you're very attentive to what's going on. What are the dynamics? Who's sitting where? Who's participating? But also what's going on? What are these external pressures? And this is where bringing in your skill of curiosity is where you should go after your relationship, and then you have the right timing, and then you're being curious, like, help me understand this decision. Have a lot of questions about it. Can you help me? What's influencing? And that's part of relationship building. And then once you have all that, then you can share the insights that you can bring that the person you're trying to support maybe hasn't considered.
Very interesting. I want to bring this up, Christina, about perspectives versus insight, because we just talked about this. It's really important that you understand that there is a difference between perspective or opinion and insight, and the power of bringing insight to the conversation. Because when you're authentically sharing your insight, it really allows you to share your all the connections and all the things of how it means, what does it mean to you, right? So it's not just a, I think we should do A, or I agree with Tim. Well, what value did you bring to the conversation? Because then they say, oh great, she's gonna, so then you don't earn your respect. The ability to share your what you care about is when you share your insight by making the connection. So that's what I think is really important, is offering that up is your insight about how you see things and how things fit together. Adding one more person to say, this is what I think, this is what I think, this is what I think, doesn't help the decision maker. It's more adding on the perspective that he's something that he doesn't see yet that you could add on is what's important.
We've had a pre-discussion about recent corporate decisions about what to do about teleworking now that COVID
Return
has
to
passed.
work.
There's been a lot of debate about this and
Return to
maybe
work.
bringing people back. And you might find out that maybe what's driving the decision is just whoever made the decision was just more comfortable because that's what they knew for 30 years. And what they're missing is insight into what's happening today. That productivity has either been the same or higher with working from home. Employee morale is, for some people, higher. Maybe hybrid would be better. So there's this new information that you want to bring in, but you have to be willing to listen, to ask the questions, and to offer those perspectives. And this is where being aware, if you have imposter syndrome, which we've done some deep dive episodes on, that imposter syndrome will sometimes cause you to feel, well, who am I? Who am I to give my opinion? Who do I think I am? And all the things that we have talked about is, when you think about it as I'm just giving my opinion, that could be a trigger word. People don't want to have their opinion shot down. So they may be hesitant to share it. And I think Karen has shared in the past and just now was, if you look at it as your insights and understand that this is your experience from your wisdom, your knowledge, it is only in you and you're offering it without any attachment, that you're bringing value to the table instead of just being a yes man or
Or
giving an
no is a trick, like,
opinion.
the no that always happens. Oh, she's just going to put a wet blanket on this. I remember when I was facilitating that wet blanket. Oh my God, here she goes again. And then people aren't even hearing you, right? Because, like, here she goes.
Yeah. This episode is about when we don't have agreement. So our assumption is whatever the decision is, ultimately, it's not something that it's going to sit quite right with you or you don't entirely agree with. Yeah. Is this the end? Are you powerless at that point? And what does it mean to be authentic when you don't agree? So there's some other steps we wanted to
Share.
offer to you. One is, and I'm an advocate, so I would say this is the next step would be then strategic inquiry is what I would call it. So maybe the answer right now is no on whatever it is. This is the direction we're going, and it's the direction you agree with. It doesn't necessarily mean you stop. You maybe stop pursuing something that just isn't going to go anywhere, but where you want to then come back into is something called strategic inquiry. And that's having the flexibility to say, well, I'm just curious. If new information were to arise, what would that information be that might influence you to think about this differently?
Mhm.
Say down the road, we started gathering information and discovering that employees were quitting the company and moving to another company that still offered hybrid or work from home. Would that be an important variable in your calculus? So I'm no longer telling them what to do. I'm trying to discover what the entry points might be for a future conversation. And it tells me where I need to be putting my attention to do gathering research, checking with my team. So I'm still in my authenticity because if I truly believe that we're going in the wrong direction, I'm not just surrendering. I'm understanding that for now, this battle is lost, but there's the bigger picture, and I'm looking for where's that opening, and I'm using strategic inquiry.
I also think in strategic inquiry also allows you to, when you deliver the difficult news, is to make sure you're understanding what's
Mhm.
driving that decision. That's what I hear you talking about. So
Mhm.
it's not just about what might change it, but even just understanding too, is there any flexibility to explore that flexibility, as I hear what you're saying. So that when you are delivering the difficult news, that it allows you to answer or share the news. You also heard why it was decided, other people shared this. So it's not just
Mhm.
purely this is decision X. When you just read off, okay, the decision was this, you don't even understand it. So this is the value of it. You have to get to time to really understand.
Yeah, how sad. I mean, how many times have folks out here received those emails with
Exactly.
some
Only email. Yep.
change in policy
Yep.
that you didn't even know was being decided on and discussed, no explanation.
Yeah.
Your boss may or may not even know, they may be blindsided by it as well. What Karen is describing is when you take that time to do that inquiry up front and you're able to understand the factors that contributed to that decision, whether you agree or don't agree, at least you can articulate it in an open and honest way with your staff. At this point in time, so what we call it is acceptance for now. This is the decision for
Yay,
now.
that's exactly what it is. For this moment, this period, this season, it's the decision right now. There's
Yeah.
still hope. Yeah, and I was also thinking about this too, because you're in the room when we're making the decision. It's really important that that group that's coming together are consistent in the communications. So we're all talking the same stuff. And that's why the strategic inquiry is nice to get really clear on, because it allows us to have the same message. That's so important to do. We just stop at the decision instead of saying, okay, so let's just make sure this is what we want to share and it's just robust enough so that you feel comfortable leaving with the decision that you can be authentic too.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
think
a
that's what you
good
could.
leader would take the time with
Mhm.
their team, with their executive team, to get to that point of what do you need to feel comfortable to share this news? I know there's going to be disappointment so that your executive team can continue to show up authentically. They don't have to make this hard choice of, well, do I speak what my truth is and throw my boss under the bus, or do I keep it to myself? Help and support your team to also be in their integrity.
Yeah, and I would also say it's important because you and I know people can't read each other's minds.
Right.
So you as a team member, your leader may not might forget to do that, or he's not very empathetic. You may want to bring this up and you facilitate that discussion. So guys, let me just make sure we're clear on what it is, because I personally want to make sure that I can answer this question or feel good about this or find what the silver lining is or whatever you want to say. So it's just not the leader, but everybody in that room has the obligation to each other to share one voice and one way of saying it so that it doesn't get confused and everybody's saying what, all this other stuff. And so this is one powerful way for change management to occur too.
Actually, in a prompt for that, if you haven't watched the video on boundaries, I encourage you to do this. But we discuss how You know that there's an issue because there's a difficult emotion. So if you're sitting in this meeting feeling resentment
Oh,
about
yes,
what
yes,
you're being,
yes.
right, what you're being asked to tell,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
means that there's still a little bit of work that you need to do your best to try to resolve in that moment before. So I'm feeling resentment that I have to do this thing. That
Don't
means you're
hold it.
not feeling comfortable doing it.
Got to bring
And
it up.
and maybe your leader didn't ask you that question, what do you need to do to feel comfortable? So it is upon you. You're feeling the discomfort. That can be your little warning sign, like, I'm not comfortable with this yet. I need some more time to talk about this. This is how what I'm feeling uncomfortable about. It almost brings you back in the loop to strategic inquiry. Is this a
Exactly.
permanent decision? Is this the decision for the next 12 months? Help me understand where this is. Is there any opportunity? But you notice what you're feeling and then do what you need to do to resolve it at that moment so that you can leave the room in your integrity and show up authentically for your team.
Yep.
It's kind of neat the way it ties right back into boundaries.
And it's really important that time too, because you're also talking about sometimes that thing is the warning of the undiscussable. So it's really a great time to also talk about the undiscussable,
Yeah.
because we recently had a layoff. Does this tie to the layoff or something? Are we,
Mm.
we appropriately thinking through this? That's what the leader, as a leadership team, you're supposed to be doing, right? No matter what level, even if you're at the lower level and you have a team that's all of your people leaders and you, this is what you got to do, right? Just make sure everybody's comfortable, because it's easy for them to say, okay, and this is the way we do it. Okay, I'll just tell them and blame you. Right? Or blame them. And this is the whole point that becomes an issue. Some of the leaders, it's just easier that way. You're gonna tell me and then I'm gonna blame you that it's your fault. And that's where you have to realize you're a people leader too. You're part of the leadership team. You can't just blame the top leader. You gotta take ownership of this stuff too. You're smiling, so I can't decide what
Yeah, I'm just
laughing.
thinking, oh my God, I think that happens quite a bit.
It happens
And
a lot because they don't want to take ownership. And instead of taking the ownership as when you're a leader, a people leader, or with other people, it's so easy to blame someone else instead of realizing when you're a leader, and this is what I'm all about, this leader, you also own you also own whatever decision the people above make, because
mm,
that's why you're being paid the big bucks, because you're supposed to help the enterprise achieve its goals, and there's a reason why that they're going towards this direction. You can't be blaming leadership and just say that, because guess what, you're in actuality you are blaming yourself without saying that it's your way. When you said the leadership, well, guess what? Your title is people leader. My
I
energy is around this, you can tell, because this is what I do every day in all my work.
Well, that's why I was just
Leadership.
sitting here thinking, like, wow, hey, if you're listening out there and you're one of those people who sort of takes that easy way out and just blames it on the higher ups, I think you need to be calling Karen, because that ultimately is shooting yourself in the foot. Because
And you lose respect. What are you really helping me do? And I think earning the respect is explaining these decisions from the best as you can and asking the questions to your leader above. And that's why I think you have that respect. And people will take difficult news when they respect you, you
yeah,
know?
and ultimately though, just to bring some empathy to it, I can understand some people what drives that. So
Oh,
you felt
yes.
powerless to influence a decision that you don't agree with. You
Yeah.
feel guilty if it's going to have an adverse impact on your team. And
Yeah.
because you feel guilty, it's the instinct to blame because you don't want to be seen as that person. But ultimately, what I mean by you shoot yourself in the foot is that ends up creating more negative attitude and animosity and lowers employee morale, which then affects your entire team and your organization. And ultimately, that's not what you want. Sometimes that blaming the other is this form of trying to empathize with the employees. And by saying, yeah, this really sucks and I don't agree with it. And I tried to do it. I didn't say it's all their fault. It is coming sometimes from this place of empathy, guilt, misplaced guilt, feeling powerless. So there's alternatives of integrity, authenticity, having some wisdom, seeing the bigger picture, being strategic. We would rather have you cultivate those skills because It'll help the entire team get through this difficult decision. And that ultimately is the goal.
It's a nice balance that you have to do. But that's why I think we chose to do this, guys, because especially in today's world, there's a lot of decisions coming down in the chaos. Like there's another leadership exchange. The senior leader has been let go, and all these changes occurring, and it's just mind-boggling. And there's so many decisions going on, and so many strategic initiatives going on, and this is everywhere. And I think this is the part of it that we wanted to make sure you understood when you're part of the conversation.
Yeah, but just to wrap up, when you're part of the conversation, we've gotten to the point of being more skillful when you deliver the difficult news. And then this is where cultivating non-attachment is really important. Let me just make a quick distinction between detachment and non-attachment. When we talk about detachment, I find that what most people think we're talking about is, I don't care. Okay, I just won't care. I'm going to be detached from it. And that's not what we're talking about, because with I don't care comes apathy, comes sabotaging behavior. You're generally going to be out of your integrity if you're trying to show up every day with an I don't care because you think that's what detachment is. So we're talking about non-attachment. In non-attachment, you feel everything. You feel, you think. Non-attachment is the acceptance of reality for what it is, but I'm not going to be grasping onto something that I think it should be. I'm also not going to be pushing it away. I'm just going to be present with what is. And that is what the practice of non-attachment. I'm not getting attached to an alternate reality that doesn't exist. I'm being present to what is actually going on, what I actually think about, and what I actually feel about it, because I need all that information in order to figure out the skillful response. And that is absolutely important to show up authentically in these difficult situations.
And that's what we also talk about, the imposter syndrome, right? When you get so attached, instead of thinking as an alert or something, like, that emotion is an alert to you, or that body sensation is really an alert. Don't get caught up in that emotion, because like that's what happened to me. And the negative emotions too is really what, that I get caught up, and then and then that resentment and all this other stuff all come to
You're
play.
hooked. That's when you get emotionally
Oh yeah, that's
hooked.
the word, hooked. Yes.
Yeah. Being non-attached is your antidote to the other side of getting emotionally hooked. But I just want to make sure you're clear. This isn't about the detachment of, well, then I don't give a, I don't, yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
Couldn't think of a non-swear way to say.
I felt the swear word though. I felt it with your body. It's so funny.
So with non-attachment, we have acceptance for now of
Acceptance, but not
reality.
condoning too, because you
Yes.
remembered me about acceptance, but it doesn't mean it's not equivalent condoning either. So I don't know if that's something.
Yeah, by acceptance, it's acknowledging. We're acknowledging what is. It does. We're not meaning accept that we condone. We just accept because we're acknowledging it is what it is for now. And then this requires that we have learned to cultivate patience. And again, we are recognizing getting those emotional hooks and trying to hold lightly, let go, and stay in our integrity. And then finally, being mindful, because when we're emotionally hooked, we're more likely to engage in these political faux pas Karen was mentioning of, blaming or, over empathizing and again, villainizing the decision maker. What we want to do is have that courage to share the truth of the information. Where are we right now? Check in with the team and explore, what are our workarounds? What support might people need? Have these open and honest conversations.
Totally agree.
Now, we did want to just touch a little bit about what happens, how do we do this when we're not part of the conversation?
The decision, or
Yeah, pretty much the same steps, which is explore if there is an opportunity to advocate. And that's asking a lot of questions. I'm a big, I'm pro advocacy. And so I will do a lot of research to find out. Basically, if you don't tell me no, my assumption, I guess, is it's yes until I'm told otherwise.
Like, stand down, Christina, stand down.
Or again, wisdom from my dad is it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And that kind of drove my life. This is where if you've done that, you're still going to inquire. You can still ask those questions about what contributed to this decision, and then all the rest, delivering the difficult news, share your understanding. And your job is to work on how you engage your team into the buy-in that might be necessary for now. Remember, it's temporary, and the non-attachment and not going into that blame game. It's all still the same steps.
And I want to push again about the inquiry, because I think that if you are to deliver some sort of news, you have the right to understand.
Mhm.
And so even if it's an email that goes down, like what I would do is when I had an email that went down, because it was an HR policy or something, and I would try to find out more information, and then I would meet with the team to discuss it more. So maybe the email went out, and I would meet with them the next day, just a quick huddle, sort of explain what I know about it. And I do that more often than I did before, mainly because I didn't realize the importance of this. But it's important that no matter what you are, even if you're a team member, that you see if you can get a deeper understanding. Because sometimes your manager isn't, they're just reading whatever. And if you have this, you can ask the manager, let me understand, what does this mean? And then let them go find out the information for you. Right. So I
Mhm,
think
mhm.
even you have a power as an individual contributor and responsibility to ask for yourself, so you understand. Because sometimes they're so busy they don't even know what they're saying sometimes. And so sometimes you want to get that. So you don't have this dissonance as an individual contributor. You can accept it better, or accept it for now again. And I think the greatest gift was acceptance for now. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
that's so powerful. I wish someone would have taught me that a lot sooner.
Well, and I think something that is helpful for people to understand, because I'm someone who doesn't think twice about asking a question.
It's true.
Again,
It's true,
I
guys.
don't
It's
have
true.
processing for social norms. And then, Karen, you have a lot of experience under your belt at this point. But when I'm thinking back to when I was in my 20s and 30s, there may be reticence to ask questions. That
Mine
people
was
have
in
their
40s. Mine was even in the 40s. I mean, because I
right.
felt like I was not in a power position. So, because I'm not in a power position, I'm not going to ask, because then I'll look stupid. And I was doing a lot of that imposter syndrome self talk and stuff. So, just wanted to say that.
Yeah, so here's a reframe I just wanted to offer. I think that people feel in a situation like this where it's not the best news or you're not happy about that, if you ask questions, immediately right there, the frame is I'm being difficult or I'm not being a team player because I'm questioning. But
Exactly.
a different way that you can frame it is and help your boss understand if you're in that role of a team member is this is really difficult news and it would help me to get to that point of understanding if you could help me understand what contributed to that decision, who made the decision, how long is it made. This is to help me process this information. I'm trying to come to terms with it. So, really, what you're doing is not being difficult. You really are trying to work with your boss or to whoever to get out of the dissonance that you are currently feeling inside yourself.
Yeah, and
And
you
that
use the word I, which is I think. So you don't have to say everybody's feeling this way or whatever. The more you use the so I can process,
mhm.
that's so valuable, because you're talking about your own situation. Or you say everybody's saying they don't like it. But if you say why and understanding why, that's very powerful. You're right. That's a great reframe.
Yeah, I think in general, most of us do tend to want to feel that we're seen as a team player.
Mhm.
And that's why there's some, matter of fact, we're going to do an episode on conflict avoidance because that feeling of I don't want to come across. And so I'm going to just silently sit with my seething resentment instead of communicating my need that I have to understand just so I could come to terms with this difficult decision. And also this understanding it's for now, and is there anything that I can do to be part of the persuasion, the part of the longer term effort to influence change. And so we can work with that discomfort if we tune back into our own value system, know yourself, know that you're not an a-hole and you're just looking at how do I get through this difficult moment with the most grace possible. And I might need some help. I might need some information support from my boss, and just asking for it gracefully.
Yeah, and that's the whole point we're trying to remind you guys is the fact that you own that dissonance and you're the only one that can share it out to resolve that dissonance. Because if you don't resolve that dissonance, and this is what happened to me, I became always overwhelmed and just always doubting and thinking, oh, this company's not right for me. When in actuality, I really like the company. But there's those things like we're talking about earlier, those pebbles of disagreements or things that I didn't understand. And so I think this is the whole point again about you own that dissonance and you have the wisdom and the ability to resolve that dissonance. Okay. So do you want to wrap it up? Because we're about at time.
Yeah, so we want you to walk away knowing I can work through these components and these steps of making sure I've taken the time to build relationships. I'm thinking about timing. I understand what the big picture is. I,
Non-attached.
I'm inquiring into all the different contributing factors, and then not being attached to your own ideas or opinions, and more also as a way to avoid getting emotionally hooked so that you can show up with the patience and the groundedness you need to deliver bad information or even to sit with the dissonance yourself, bringing empathy to yourself, being empathy to a team that you might be working with, cultivating that humility that you may think. I definitely had a lot of chutzpah and thought I knew better. And part of my growth was to learn to be humble. It was the perspective I had with the information and wisdom and the experiences at the time. And that certainly has grown over the years. And then being able to decide in your integrity, are you the type of person who throws someone under the bus? Because if that's not what you do, realign with those values and make these choices to be empathetic, compassionate, continue to advocate, continue to try to work for that change. That's how you can still show up in your authenticity and avoid the political faux pas traps that might be coming out of anger, resentment, or the dissonance that you're not resolving. That sort of summarizes, I think, what we're trying to get. I know this is primarily in the work environment, but this is where we do see this occurring mostly.
Yeah.
But I
But it,
do,
like we said earlier, it could be family, even family dynamics, team members of family, and all this other stuff. When you have to move because of the job or something, they may
Mhm.
not like it, but
Yeah.
similar type of things, And I think this is just, and I think the work is easier for us to start to apply these techniques, and then you could use it on the family. That's what I was even thinking for me because work, you just grow and learn these different techniques, which will help, within the family as well.
Yeah, these actually, I invite people to sort of look at these and think about any relational, like more in your personal life. Where is it not helpful to focus on the relationship? Think about, what's on your partner's plate already when you're thinking about timing. Is it a good time to bring something up? What else is going on? What are the other stressors that your partner might be feeling? Are you really being honest about how you're seeing it? Ask a lot of questions and then talk about how you feel about whatever the difficult decision is. If you're, say, the partner in a blended family, you're the step parent, and so you don't really have a seat at the table at the decision making between your partner and their ex about their kid. How do you sit with some of the difficult situations and have it not erode your own relationship? And then how do you keep moving? And this is more of a spiral because then you're constantly looping back to that relationship, looping back to cultivating non attachment to what the outcome is. It really does all apply. It's just that we didn't have time to go so much into personal relationships. We wanted to just focus on the business relationships for today. So, Karen, any last words that you want to add?
No, I'm so excited for you guys to explore these tools and the steps that Christina has outlined because I'm telling you, this will give you a leg up and to have that, that authenticity that we all strive for, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so excited to hear the results. We'd love to hear more about what you thought about this episode, as well as some ideas about where there was a difficult situation and anything else about the steps that we shared and your perspectives on that, because that would help other people, because we want to create a community. One of the things that Christina wanted was very, I don't want to say adamant, but she really wanted was to make sure that this wasn't us just sharing. She wants to create a community so we can also help each other, because there's a flavor of this that we may not see because of our own life. And so it's really important that we become a community with each other. And so that's something that we'd love to share with you on the comments, as well as we'd love for you to like and subscribe and follow us or download it or whatever you are. We are just so excited again about bringing you these stories and insights about and actions on how to be simply human with all the challenges, joys, and absurdities related to.
Amen on that one, Karen. All right. Thanks,
Till
everybody. Have
next
a
time.
fantastic week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.